Listen-only mode.
Hello everybody, this is Nick Gercio over here at TAB, and welcome to Out of Home Office Hours. Today we're going to be doing a Out of Home Ratings 101 Out of Home Office Hours, where we're going to talk a little bit about the visibility research, behind the VAI components or visibility adjustment indices that are embedded into our impressions, our reach and frequency, our ratings. Every element of our rating system has visibility factored into it. So there's not a single piece of ratings information in TAB out-of-home ratings that hasn't accounted for visibility in some way. And so we'll talk a little bit about that today. So it's a short presentation, but we're going to have a little bit of time for questions as well. This is being recorded. As of now, all of our out-of-home office hours are for members only. So if you have anybody who at your company who is a member can see it, please reach out to me. I will be showing my email address towards the end of the presentation. You could email me and I could send you a copy of the or a YouTube link, private link to this video. For questions, we have our questions box and the GoToWebinar little user panel there that you can enter your questions into at the end, and I'll be answering some of those. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. A quick reminder, in our research program, we have 4 key components. We have 4 key building blocks from which the rating system was developed. And this was based on the actual specifications that was delivered to TAB about how to build the system, what needed to be a part of the system. And right there at the base is our circulation counts. It's all of it's the expertise that we've developed here since 1933. And that involves a very long and arduous process of collecting circulation information and analyzing it and loading it into different systems and utilizing it in different ways. But ultimately, that is at least the basis behind the old DEC. That is carried on into the new rating system, and it's a huge data set, and it's a hugely informative and valuable piece of data from which impressions are partially derived. The other key parts are demographics and reach and frequency, which are adding information that we've never had before TAB out-of-home ratings, at least in any real substantial or fun or just quantitative way. I mean, there was sort of a very simple model that we use for reach and frequency that basically you would have all of your reach on the first day, and after that just your frequency would grow. It didn't actually consider the audiences that are viewing different inventory and sort of comparing the overlap of those audiences and studying duplication or anything like that. And our demographics were sort of just judgment calls that were made by GMs or managers or whatever. There was no actual real data that went in behind it. And those are very obvious things that are just simply missing from our rating system. And I say obvious because those are things that are so prevalent in the rating systems of other media. It's very hard to talk in terms of other media without talking about a target demographic or some particular time frame for a campaign for which your reach will ultimately be this or your frequency will ultimately be this. These are just basic media metrics that we didn't have before out-of-home ratings. But this final piece is the visibility research, and this is something that is, at least in the way that it's been executed and been put into the rating system, this is pretty unique to out-of-home, because we are the only medium that has this type of visibility research ingrained into its impression numbers and all of its ratings, to where you don't have any numbers available that visibility hasn't been considered. So it's the bedrock of our measurement here in this industry. While there are different things that are available in other media that, in addition to other types of measurement, or as something you could view instead of or alongside or something like that, or different types of smaller studies and things like that. That's not what I'm talking about here. We're talking about actually being the fundamental principle or a part of a fundamental principle of measurement in a medium. We're pretty unique here by adding this piece. Why did we add this piece? Well, there's a lot of reasons why this is very necessary for out-of-home. The biggest one I think is that we are a very unique medium in that we have so many different types of formats. When people talk about screens, when people talk about online advertising, or digital advertising, or television advertising, or things like that, there are different size screens, but most people are set at an optimal angle, or optimal distance, I should say, to that particular screen that basically makes all different screen sizes alike. You're either sitting at a distance. You're probably sitting at a distance from which you could see the entire screen. It's in a certain field of view that you can see a certain level of detail on that screen, etc. So basically, the differences between the different screen sizes in the example of television, let's say, is negligible. That is not true in our medium. You could have your 14 by 48 bulletin that's set to the right side of the road, 50 feet from the road, angled in a perfect direction for the audience to see. Let's say it's a center read, actually. Let's say it's set on a curve of the road, or it's set on a structure that is in the center of the road as opposed to a side-hand read. That particular unit would get the same DEC as a bus bench that was set half a mile from the left side of the road, that is sort of angled away from the road, that is technically visible from that particular road segment where we're measuring. But on paper, those are going to have the same numbers. Now, we all know that the impact of those aren't the same. That's not really what we're measuring. But we also know we also know that there's not the same number of people viewing those, because of how much easier it is to see, how much more that large scale format that I'm talking about. And by the way, size isn't the only factor here. I'm giving just a particular example. We all know that has a higher chance of being seen, and so the rating system needed to be able to incorporate those type of or accommodate those type of differences within the system, so that on paper you could actually see likelihood to see numbers as opposed to just simply opportunity to see numbers. Basically, in short, the variation between the different types of opportunity to see in our medium are so wide that visibility tells us gives us a much better picture of actual impressions. So now this is something that a lot of other media don't offer. A lot of other media just offer opportunity to see measures, so they don't feel too bad about it. Why do we? Well, this is something that advertisers have been asking for years. This isn't just something that we decided. We have a different enough media. We need to make some different type of accommodations for our different types of inventory and things like this. This is a step forward and past our media. When we set out to make the rating system, we wanted to make a strong step past the measurement of other media, especially in this department or in this area. And so this is something that ultimately advertisers care about and want. And when they find out that they're actually dealing with impressions from an audience, these are likely to see impressions, as opposed to just opportunity to see impressions. They have a more clear picture of who's actually viewing advertising. So it's just better information. It's more reliable information, and B, because of the nature of out of home, we have such large numbers, which is a good thing, of people traveling down roads and things. When people would try to put these numbers into different models they would blow up. They would have just very large scale numbers when we're talking about circulation again. that they would try to drop alongside another number, it would be too big. And the problem isn't necessarily that it's big. A big number is good. It's that there was a lot of discounting going on. People would say, well, that's a big bulk number of people traveling on roads. We're not talking about actual viewership here. People haven't been dialed in or selected media in this case, so we have to do that in some way. So we're going to discount by 50% or more than 50% or whatever it was. So there were different sort of rationalizations for discounting and things like that. And ultimately, part of the decision to incorporate this is that, well, look, we think that we more than what you're discounting is actually viewing. So let's go ahead and do the study, and we did that. So we did that with the help of several research partners that involved eye tracking research, and we'll talk a little bit about that now. So ultimately, the visibility research program was designed to determine the portion of people who pass an out-of-home advertising unit and actually see its advertising. So more precisely, it was designed to determine how a unit's format, size, roadside, angle to the road, and distance to the road affect the likelihood that the advertising will be noticed. So ultimately, what we're really getting at here is the power of each of these particulars, format, size, road size, the power of each of those factors to influence noticing. That's what we want to know. That's ultimately what we developed the whole visibility research program to find out, so that we can, like I said, make a quantitative differentiation between that bulletin and the bus bench, because I mentioned that word impact. It's got a lot of different meanings. The way I meant it was, there's the obvious one of when you see a large bulletin or a big wallscape or whatever it is, you are impacted. You have by that message much more strongly than you are if you see it kind of very small in a different, smaller format. So that's an obvious one, but simply telling that to an advertiser while offering the same numbers for both is not exactly where you want to be when you're actually buying and selling in this medium. So, like I mentioned, there was eye tracking research technology that was used. The participants in the study did not know they were related to an out-of-home advertising sort of study, and ultimately the impact of the various features were considered. So we had HD footage of setups where people would look like they're driving. This is a mock-up here. The setup wouldn't be exactly like this, but this is just designed to show the principle. All the necessary factors would have been accounted for in terms of like making sure that this is a realistic road, driving scenario. And they weren't, like I said, obviously aware of being part of an out-of-home advertising study, so they're not being asked to look at out-of-home advertising like you're seeing in this particular instance. But ultimately, you do enough studies in enough different road situations with enough different types of inventory, and ultimately you're going to be able to understand the impact of a particular factor on noticing. So this is a question we used to get a little bit more whenever this was released, and it was called Eyes On, because that was the primary sort of thing that was being talked about, because it was the new, cool part of it. But we still do get this text question from time to time, which is, how are each of the 6 visibility factors weighted in developing the VAI score? And by the way, the visibility adjustment index is what VAI means, and that's actually the score that every single piece of inventory and every single unit has a VAI score. And the answer there is that it's not a simple answer, because VAI is based on a sophisticated technique that considers all factors simultaneously. So it's not like a simple algebraic formula where you say, well, it's this size, format, so that gives it point blank, and it's this far from the road, so that gives it point blank. Multiply all those or add those together, and you get blank. There's your VAI score. Simple, easy. There's a complex algorithm that goes into actually developing this for each particular unit or all of its constraints in tandem. So basically, though, the importance of any predictor is based on the relative power of the variable in determining noticing and the relative presence of that characteristic among hundreds of thousands of units of inventory. So ultimately, what we're getting to in all of this is that these different factors, or which we're calling predictors here, is just one piece of a puzzle that is ultimately going to be expandable, which we did with transit and digital. So, for example, with digital, we had a new piece of information that we needed to add to this, which is dwell time. And by the way, with Ratings 2.0, this is all incorporated across all media, whether it's digital or not, which is incorporating the impact of dwell time, which is your maximum viewing distance, which is as far away as you could be in a typical viewing experience from a particular piece of advertising, to actually be able to see it and read the copy on it, et cetera, et cetera. As far away as that is possible, that's the maximum noting distance. The average speed actually being traveled, which is where new information that we've incorporated from INRIX and other places, which is actual real-time speed data, going into this, so that we can actually, because obviously a speed limit on a road is not a good gauge of how fast people are going. We all have sat through traffic for many hours, and we know that's not the case. So actual speed data, when you have those two factors, you could actually see the average dwell time, and that's a very important factor in determining how many ads on a digital are seen. So ultimately, these are expandable as well. So not only, I guess, long story short, not only are the way that the actual factors related not simplistic, but they are also a part of a larger study, or approach, I should say, to actually being able to get at important real world, road viewing situations that determine, an impact likelihood to see. So this is an example. I think this may help a little bit, because it's easier to compare these things when you're not viewing a bunch of different factors at once. So what we have is a control here, which is same side of the road, same distance to the road, and we can see just in this particular example the different how these different sizes are how their scores will stack up. So these are typical. This is obviously not, like I said, it's not as simple as saying, okay, all bulletins 68% of, that's a percentage expressed as a decimal, by the way. So, yeah, 68% of everybody passing my bulletin is actually seeing. That's not the case. This is just a particular example, but we could see how one factor can sort of stack up against the rest in terms of the actual format here, and ultimately the size. So you can imagine that for all the different constraints, there are similar sort of differentiations that are happening in that algorithm. Like I said, now with dwell time, that's another component, so we really shouldn't say 6. There's more than that now. Those are all being considered together to give us a score like some of the scores that you're seeing here for a particular unit of inventory. An important point in all of this is to remember that we are talking about something right now that is behind that is sort of behind the scenes. In other words, none of this stuff you're going to have to consider yourself, but it's important on the research side for us to all understand where this is coming from, because when you talk to, let's say you're working at a vendor or at an agency and you're talking to an advertiser about the number of impressions you're getting, you need to be explicit about these are impressions that have already had visibility accounted for. So when I say this is an impression, I mean this is a realistic number of people that you can expect to have actually seen this advertisement in the last week, or campaign time, whatever, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, etc. That is different. That is fundamentally different than what other people are, a lot of other media are offering in terms of impression levels and things like that. When they say that, they mean this is the number of copies of the paper that have been sold. That has nothing to do with number of people that have looked at a particular ad in the newspaper, etc. I hope that's clear. So and naturally, what follows that is, okay, well, how do you know? And having an idea, I guess, in other words, how this works behind the scenes allows you to have a more informed conversation. So, and then also just, I mentioned impressions there. I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that it's only impressions that are impacted by this. So when we talk about reach and frequency, we're talking about people, when we say someone has been reached, we mean that they have seen advertising. We don't mean that they have passed advertising. They did not have an opportunity to see, they were likely to see the advertising. So every bit and scrap of data that is available has already had this accounted for. You don't need to do any further calculating or numbers or anything like that. This is integral to the rating system, and I hope that's clear as well. So all in all, it's a very simple but very important part of our rating system. And if anybody has any questions about that now, I would be more than happy to take some. Let me open my questions box here. Okay. And while I wait for any questions, I mentioned that my email address would be available. It is nGuercio. My name is Nick Guercio. This is nGuercio@tabonline.com. So please email me if you want a copy of this short presentation or any of the others that we've done. Like I said, these are members only right now, so we can't share them publicly on our YouTube page. But we do have these all unlisted on our YouTube page, rather. So they are available via a private or unlinked link that I can send you. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions here. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and please join us next time for Out of Home Office Hours. Have a great day.